I told you that there were some major holes in your automated pricing strategy, but the only way you could find out is if you had access to data with properties around the country or even around the world like our team does? If you're using an automated pricing tool like Beyond Pricing or Wheelhouse or PriceLabs and you're thinking you can set it and forget it, well, unfortunately you can't. So I hate to break your heart, but our team has discovered 5 places where these tools really fail, no matter your type of property or your location. So today I'm going to share why these platforms cannot be hands-off and never will be. I talk a lot about dynamic pricing on this channel. It seems like every other episode. And I do that because it's really, really important. So I hope you guys have been finding value in those episodes. Unfortunately, these dynamic pricing tools are not perfect. And our team's discovered 5 holes that they unfortunately are not going to be able to fix. We've discovered this because we have access to lots and lots of data now that we're managing properties in over 20 cities and a lot of different countries around the world. Here's 5 reasons why your automated pricing is failing you and what you can do to overcome it. The first major hole with any automated pricing tool, I don't care which one it is, they all function the same way, is that their data is scraped. What do I mean by that? It's actually not real reservation data. And what they do is they have these tools that go online, they scrape all these different listings, so all these different Airbnb listings, and they pull up the calendar and they pull up the price. And if that calendar is blocked, then they assume that there was a reservation for that date at that price. But we know that calendars get blocked for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? You could have maintenance going on at your property. You could be staying there on vacation. You could be considering selling your property. Maybe you blocked it for a month or 2 months and you have people coming in and out of it. Well, if all of those blocks on the calendar are getting counted as booked days, then that really throws off the revenue estimate for that property and for the pricing suggestions that these automated pricing tools are giving you for your property. I interviewed one of the founders of PriceLabs recently, and they said it themselves. They don't have access to all the data that they need. Otherwise, they'd really be able to figure out the algorithms for these individual listing sites like Airbnb or VRBO or Booking.com. And we know that they don't want us to know how their algorithms work. Otherwise, we would all game it, right? We would all do whatever we can to stay at the top of the list. So unfortunately, knowing that, these automated pricing tools are never going to have access to all the data that we need, which means that this is always going to be a weak spot with any dynamic pricing tool. The second reason why your automated pricing strategy is failing you is because it's a one-size-fits-all approach. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you're on your pricing tool and you plug in $100 a night, and you want that $100 a night to go to all your different listing sites. So on Airbnb, it shows up as $100. On Booking.com, it shows up as $100. On VRBO, it shows up as $100. And that's how it works. But we know that your performance on these different channels can vary greatly. So maybe you're doing a really good job at Airbnb and maybe you don't have as many reviews on VRBO. You should be able to charge more on Airbnb because you have more listing visibility, right? Their platform is pushing you higher. I know in my personal portfolio, I have quite a few properties that I've marked up a lot, like over 20% on Booking.com to account for my performance on Booking.com. And so my prices, or the amount that I'm charging on Booking.com, is way more than it is on Airbnb. But if I were to leave it up to these pricing tools, it would be the same. And I'd be leaving a lot of money on the table. The third place that an automated pricing tool is failing you is when they just don't have a lot of data. So maybe you're in a rural area. Maybe you've got a cabin way out in the woods. Maybe you've got a nice luxury property on an island and it's far from a lot of other properties. Well, these pricing tools use data from other properties to help suggest your prices. So if they don't have a lot of data, then that means they can't do a good job at suggesting your prices. And so what happens if they don't have a lot of data? Well, the way they work is that they have this minimum amount of properties that they like to use, or some sort of threshold, you could say. On PriceLabs, it's 250, which means that if there are no properties immediately next to yours, they will continue to broaden their radius, meaning that they're going to be using data from properties that are further and further away from yours until they meet that minimum threshold. The other thing that they might do is broaden the type of property search. So let's say that luxury property on the island is 8 bedrooms. Well, maybe there's no other 8 bedrooms, so they start looking for 7 or 6 or 5 bedrooms. So you can see how this data will get less less and less accurate the fewer properties there are around you. So I've got a couple tips, a couple suggestions that can help you overcome the lack of data. But before we get into that, let's jump to number 4. And that is if you have a property that's really operating at the upper end of your category or the upper end of your market. So let's say you've got a property and you have 500 5-star reviews. I'm just making an extreme example here. And there's no other properties near you that have even 200 reviews. Well, then you're going to get way more visibility on these platforms that you have really good reviews, meaning that you can charge higher prices, or if you're not charging higher prices, then you're going to get booked sooner, right? And this is pretty much the same if you have a unique property. So let's say you have a tree house or you have an airplane that you turned into an Airbnb. There's not a lot of comparable data out there. So again, these pricing algorithms, these pricing tools aren't going to be able to accurately suggest pricing for your property. And lastly, the 5th place where your pricing is failing you is when it comes to fees or promotions or discounts. And so your pricing tool is not actually seeing the whole picture. You're charging a price on this pricing tool, whether it's PriceLabs or Beyond Pricing or Wheelhouse, and that goes out to many times your property management software, which then sends that out to these different channels like Airbnb and VRBO. Yes, you can go to those channels directly if you're not using a property management software, but the challenge is those prices that are going out don't know that there could be a lot of fees that are going to get tied into them, or there could be a big discount or some sort of promotion that's getting tied into that pricing. So if you're adjusting your prices on one of these dynamic pricing tools, maybe it's that $100 a night, but when it winds up on Airbnb, it's actually charging the guests $200 a night because it has a pet fee or it has a high cleaning fee. Or the opposite, right? Maybe you have a weekly discount on there, and so you've got $100 a night, but all of a sudden you get a booking for 7 days and the average price comes down to $60 a night because you forgot that you had a weekly discount set up for that specific channel. So unfortunately, these pricing tools don't know that information. They don't know about all your fees. They don't know about your discounts and promotions, and therefore they can't accurately price your property across all these channels. It's really just not seeing the full picture. So there we go. There are 5 reasons why your dynamic pricing tool is failing you and will for the rest of the foreseeable future. The first one was scrape data. The second one was if you happen to be in an area where there are no nearby properties, they're going to search further and further away. And the more or the further they search, the less accurate that data will be. The third one is sort of related to number 2. And that is if you have a really unique property or you have a property that's just really crushing it. It's got tons of good reviews and it has a lot of reviews. And again, because there's not a lot of good comparable data. The fourth one we talked about were channel markups, right? So these dynamic pricing tools have a one-size-fits-all pricing. And then lastly, these dynamic pricing tools do not know your fees or if you have any discounts there. So there are a couple tips here, a couple things that you'll want to do to make sure you overcome this lack of data. And the first one is having your own comp set. And I know that sounds like it might be difficult if there aren't a lot of properties around. Usually there's something there, right? And your hand-picked comp set is going to be better than an algorithm's comp set in most cases. If you don't have the luxury of having other comparable data though, you're really just left to testing, right? You're going to have to set prices if this is a brand new property. You're going to have to set prices and monitor your bookings really, really closely. Hopefully you have an idea of the booking window for your property. Remember, booking window is how far in advance people are making reservations at your property. And this changes throughout the year. So in a really high demand part of the year, in the high season, people are going to book that property sooner. So hopefully you have some sort of idea around this and you can test your prices, monitor those booking windows. And if your booking window is passed and days are going by and you still haven't gotten a reservation when you should have, well, then you know your price is too high and you're going to have to knock it down a little bit. Or the opposite, right? If you're getting booked way ahead of your booking window, then your prices are too low. Of course, if you have historical data for your property, then this is always going to be helpful. Historic data is not a guarantee of future performance, but it is a good predictor. And so you can at least use that as a base place to start and really test your prices. So I know you might be thinking, Tim, this is all great, but I don't have the time to monitor this every day, or I don't know how, or I just don't want to do it. And if that's the case, Our team would love to help you with this. We work with properties all over the place. As I mentioned, you can find out more information at strriches.com. There's a little property management button there, and you can book a time to speak with our team. We also have all of our past episodes there at strriches.com, and we've talked about a lot of these things. So if you've been enjoying the content, I'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind leaving us a like and subscribing to the channel. I know that our content will help you across your journey. So don't get me wrong, dynamic pricing tools can offer a ton of benefits. I highly recommend using one. They can be huge time savers, but they do have some holes. And so you can't just hand over your pricing to one of these algorithms that doesn't understand all the nuances to your property, doesn't know about the fees or promotions maybe that you have tied in there, doesn't know how you should be pricing on these different channels. So you're gonna need to test the data, and hopefully by doing that, you can stretch beyond what your competition is doing. Make sure you earn maximum revenue with your property. If you enjoyed this episode, well, we have a lot of other episodes on this channel that I know you will find value in. There's one specifically I think that you should check out, and that has to do with minimum prices. So I know you have a minimum price for your property, but do you have a second minimum price or even a third minimum price? You might be thinking, Tim, how the heck do I have two minimum prices? Well, there is a way, and you should have one. And so check out this next video if that sounds interesting to you.